The pounding came first, sharp, violent thuds against the front door that shook the frame, then her voice. Was Sierra. Even after 2 years, that voice could still make my stomach twist. Open this door, Evelyn. Don't make me do something we at both regret. I didn't move. I sat in the old armchair by the window, the only piece of furniture left that still felt like mine, listening to her fists slam against the wood. My hands trembled, but not from fear this time. The fear had burned out weeks ago. What I felt now was something steadier, colder, final. I looked around the living room, the one I had painted in soft apricot back when Henry was alive. The walls were scuffed now, marked by years of careless elbows and furniture dragged without care. Sierra's neon shoes were still by the shoe rack. She had left them there like a signature of ownership. My house, my sanctuary, had become a stranger's stage. And now, finally, I was taking it back. I didn't answer her. I just watched the doorknob rattle and remembered how everything began, how I, a woman who once taught literature and believed in kindness, let myself be turned into a shadow in my own home. 2 years earlier, Marcus had called me, voice low and anxious. Mom, Sierra and I are in a bit of a bind. The rent sit's gone up and her contract got cut. Just until we find something new, can we stay with you for a while? Of course I said yes. He was my son, my only child. I had raised him alone since the day his father walked out when Marcus was barely 3. I still remembered his little hand gripping mine at the courthouse. We'll be okay, Mommy, he'd said, in that soft, solemn way children sometimes promise what they can't possibly know. So I opened my door, my heart, and let them in. At first it felt almost joyful. I cooked big dinners, fussed over Sierra's headaches, washed their clothes while they worked. The house was full again, laughter, voices, footsteps. I told myself this was what love looked like, family under one roof. But slowly, almost invisibly, things began to shift. Sierra had opinions about everything, how I arranged my kitchen, the old lady curtains, the way I seasoned food. She said it with that polite smile people wear when they're dressing up cruelty as advice. You know, Evelyn, maybe you should let me handle the cooking. It sits just, Marcus likes things a certain way. And Marcus, my boy who used to write me Mother's Day cards in purple crayon, he nodded. He didn't defend me. He never did after that. Weeks passed and my place at the table moved further from the center. They watched shows late into the night while I learned to keep quiet so the floorboards wouldn't creak. I stopped sitting on the living room sofa because Sierra once said, Mom, could you not leave crumbs there? This is our space for relaxing. Our space, not mine. Eventually, she started giving me chores like I was a tenant paying in labor. Could you wash the drapes tomorrow? Oh, and iron Marcus's shirts, please. You sit home all day anyway. I told myself it was temporary, that I was just helping them through a hard patch, but the patch never ended. Then came the day I knew the house no longer belonged to me. I had just finished making dinner, baked chicken with rosemary, Marcus's favorite since he was a child. Sierra came in, looked at the table, and frowned. I told you I don't like greasy food, Evelyn. You know that, right? She scraped the plate into the trash, just like that. I looked at Marcus expecting him to say something, anything, but he just sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, Mom, please don't make a scene. You know how she gets when she sits stressed. That night, I lay awake in the tiny room they called the utility space, listening to them laughing in the living room. My knees ached from mopping the kitchen earlier, and the smell of the cleaner still lingered on my hands. I remember staring at the ceiling, cracked and yellowed with age, and realizing how small I'd become, how carefully I had shrunk myself to fit their comfort. The next morning, Sierra left a note on the counter. Laundry detergent's low. Could you pick some up when you go for your walk? The lavender kind, not the cheap one this time. Oh, and make sure to wash the bathroom rug. It smells. It wasn't a request, it was a command. Something inside me, something I hadn't felt in years, stirred. Not anger exactly, but clarity. I folded the note and slid it into my pocket like evidence. I didn't know yet what I'd do, only that I couldn't keep pretending this was love. That week, while they were both at work, I walked to a law office downtown. The air smelled of rain and car exhaust. I almost turned back twice before stepping inside. The receptionist looked up. Can I help you, Madame? Yes, I said. I need to know how to get my life back. That's how I met Caleb Monroe, the lawyer who would later tell me the words that changed everything. Mrs. Carter, your name is the only one on that deed. Legally, you don't have tenants. You have squatters with blood ties. I remember laughing, a dry, broken laugh. They septure my family. He leaned forward, then make them act like it, or make them leave. For the next few months, I pretended everything was the same. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled, but at night I recorded every insult, every belittling comment, every sigh of contempt that came from the son I had once carried in my arms. I hid the files on a small flash drive inside an old recipe tin labeled Lemon Bars 1998. Sierra never baked. She never even opened it. Each day I grew quieter, but inside me something solid was forming, like a key taking shape in fire. And one morning I woke up before dawn, sat at the kitchen table, and whispered aloud for the first time, "This is my house." The sound of it startled me, my own voice, steady, sure, unshaken. By evening, the decision was made. The locksmith arrived while Marcus and Sierra were gone. I watched him replace the locks one by one, the click of each bolt sounding like a heartbeat coming back to life. When he finished, he smiled politely. "Problem with break-ins, Massdam." I smiled too, something like that. That night I sat in my chair, the same chair I'm in now, as Sierra pounds on the door, and waited for them to come home. The world outside dimmed into dusk. The porch light flickered on. My tea went cold, but I didn't move. Because for the first time in 2 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, behind a locked door that was mine. The day everything inside me finally cracked was a Tuesday. It was raining, a thin silver rain that made the house smell like damp paper and bleach. Sierra had gone out for groceries, her kind of groceries, organic and overpriced, and Marcus was in the garage pretending to fix a shelf he'd been working on for 6 months. I was in the kitchen mopping the floor for the second time that day when Sierra came back in. She didn't even wipe her shoes. Mud splattered across the tiles I'd just cleaned. "You missed a spot," she said casually, tossing her purse on the counter. "Honestly, Evelyn, I don't know what you do all day." I stood there, gripping the mop handle so tightly my fingers ached. Something sharp and electric moved through me, like a spark finally finding dry tinder. "What did you say?" My voice came out calm, too calm. She turned, blinking as if I'd spoken in another language. "I said you missed a spot." But what she meant, what she had always meant, was, "You are useless." That night, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat on the edge of my narrow cot in the utility room and stared at the wall until the clock hit midnight. The sound of their laughter floated through the hallway like static. For 2 years, I told myself they'd change, that if I stayed kind, patient, understanding, they would remember the woman who raised Marcus, who paid his college tuition, who sat up through the night sewing costumes for his school plays. But there comes a moment when love stops sounding like love and starts sounding like surrender. And I was done surrendering. The next morning, I took a bus downtown. I told Sierra I was going to pick up medication. She barely looked up from her phone. The lawyer's office sat on the corner of Peachtree Street, a tall glass building that made me feel small before I even entered. Inside, everything smelled of lemon polish and paper. The receptionist asked for my name, and within minutes I was sitting across from Caleb Monroe, a kind-eyed man in his 40s, his tie slightly askew, as if he'd rushed from one problem to the next. He listened without interrupting. I told him everything. The insults, the nights I ate alone in the kitchen while they laughed in the living room, the humiliation of sleeping beside the washing machine in the house I'd built with my late husband. When I finished, my voice was shaking. "They call it help," I said. "They say they sit her taking care of me, but I sit in the one paying the bills, Mr. Monroe. I pay for the food, the power, everything." He studied the papers I brought, the deed, the receipts, the utilities. Then he looked up and said something I'll never forget. "Mrs. Carter, you stir not living with them. They stir living off you. And legally that house belongs to you alone. You have every right to ask them to leave." The words didn't sink in right away. They just floated there like something too heavy to touch. "But they're my son and daughter-in-law," I said weakly. He nodded, his tone soft but firm. "And family doesn't sit mean servitude. What sits happening to you is emotional abuse. If you want to take back your home, I can help you do it the right way." For the first time in years, I felt the faint outline of hope. It was small, fragile, like a flicker in a dark room. He explained the process, how long it might take, what documents I still need. Before I left, he said, "Don't warn them yet. Get your evidence first. Then when you were ready, we still make it official." That afternoon, I walked home through the drizzle, holding my purse close to my chest like a secret. The clouds hung low over the rooftops, gray and swollen, but I felt lighter than I had in months. When I stepped inside, Sierra was sprawled across the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and frowned. "Did you pick up my vitamins?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet." "Then what took you so long?" I didn't answer. I just went to my room, closed the door, and plugged my phone into charge. That night, I began recording. The first clip caught Sierra complaining that the towels weren't folded the way she liked. The next was Marcus saying, "Mom, can you keep quiet while we're watching something," as if my very presence ruined the air around him. Each recording felt like proof not only of their cruelty but of my sanity, a record that I wasn't imagining it, that I wasn't crazy, that this really was happening. Over the next few weeks, I lived in two worlds, the one they saw and the one I was building in silence. To them, I was the quiet, obedient mother who did as she was told. To myself, I was the woman who'd begun saving her own money in a separate account, who had called a locksmith for a quote, who had bought a sturdy folder and labeled it my freedom. Sometimes when Sierra ordered me to do something, wash the drapes, iron my dresses, stay out of our room, I'd nod and smile, all while feeling the steel forming inside me. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, methodical. I became polite to a fault. I cooked what they wanted. I laughed when I was expected to, and all the while I gathered proof like seeds. One night I played back a recording from that morning. Sierra Sitt's voice, sharp as glass. "Evelyn, maybe you should look into assisted living. It sits not healthy for you to be here. You sit, you're just in the way." Marcus had said nothing, just silence. That silence hurt more than the words. I saved the file and whispered to myself, "That one sits for the judge." A month later, Mr. Monroe called. "Yusuf got enough, Mrs. Carter. The law is on your side. We can serve them notice." I told him I wasn't sit ready, not yet. He hesitated. Why not? Because I wanted it to be on my terms. I didn't want papers and signatures. I wanted to look into their eyes to see the realization dawn that they had underestimated me. I wanted to turn the key myself. The next day I stood at the sink washing dishes when Marcus came in. "Mom," he said almost cheerfully, "Sierra and I were thinking of redecorating, maybe repaint the walls, get new furniture. You sit like that, right?" I looked at the living room through the window, the same room where Henry and I had danced once after paying off the mortgage. "You do whatever makes you happy," I said. He smiled, satisfied. He didn't realize those were the last words I'd ever say to him as a woman under his roof. Because that night after they went to sleep, I pulled the folder from beneath my bed and opened it one last time. The deed, the receipts, the lawyer's card, the flash drive of recordings, everything was in place. Then I did something small, almost ceremonial. I took the family photo from the hallway, the one where we all smiled at a picnic years ago, and turned it face down. "I'll stop being the background in my own life," I whispered. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, low and distant, like a warning or a promise. Either way, I was ready. The morning I changed the locks, the sun came up in a dull, washed-out gray, the kind of sky that doesn't promise anything, no rain, no light, just a quiet waiting. I had been awake since 4, sitting on the edge of my bed with my robe drawn around me, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. The folder lay on the table. I had read through every paper twice, deed, legal notice, property ID, all stamped and sealed. My hands weren't shaking. They should have been, but they weren't. Something in me had already crossed over. I was calm the way a storm is calm before it begins. At 7, Marcus and Sierra left the house. Sierra kissed him on the cheek, muttering something about meeting a client. I waited until their car pulled away and disappeared around the bend. Then I called the locksmith. He arrived 20 minutes later in a white van, a young man, maybe 30, with oil-stained hands and a polite smile. "Morning, Miss Dom. You stir the one needing all the locks replaced?" "Yes," I said. "Every single one." He whistled softly. "That sips a lot of locks." I almost laughed. You could say it's been a long time coming. He got to work. The metallic clink of his tools echoed down the hallway, sharp and steady. With every click, every turn of his screwdriver, I felt something inside me shift, a link snapping, a weight loosening. When he was done, he handed me a small silver ring. "Here you go. All new. Strong ones too. You shouldn't have any trouble now." I held those keys like they were something sacred. "Thank you," I said. He smiled. "Bad neighborhood?" I looked out at the quiet street, at the trimmed lawns and peaceful houses. "No," I said. "Bad tenants." He laughed awkwardly, not understanding, and left. By noon, I'd packed their things, every shirt, every dress, every bit of clutter they had scattered across my house. I folded it all neatly into suitcases and sealed them in the guest room. It felt like cleaning after a long illness. I made tea, sat by the window, and waited. The steam rose, the clock ticked. The world stayed perfectly ordinary for one last moment. Then I heard the car. Their voices outside, muffled at first, then sharp. The sound of the doorknob twisting. The first thud of Sierra Sit's fist against the wood. Evelyn, what the hell is this? Did you change the locks? I didn't instead answer. The second blow came harder. Open the door. This is illegal. Illegal. The word almost made me laugh. They had turned my house into a cage and now they spoke of laws. I stood up, went to the door and spoke through it. My voice was calm, low, steady. You don't live here anymore, Sierra. You and Marcus need to leave. Excuse me, she screamed. This is our home. You can sit just... Behind her voice came Marcus Sit's, lower, colder. Mom, open the door. We can talk about this. Before sis, nothing to talk about. Silence, then the sound of metal scraping, Marcus trying to pry the lock. I took a deep breath and called the police. I explained everything clear and precise, just like Caleb had told me. My name is Evelyn Carter. This is my property. My son is attempting to break in. I have ownership papers. The operator Sit's voice was calm. Stay inside, Mustam. Officers are on their way. Outside, the banging grew louder. Sierra was shouting to the neighbors now. Sit's lost her mind. She locked us out. This is elder abuse in reverse. Her words floated through the air like poison. Then came the worst sound, a crack of wood. Marcus was using something heavy. Marcus, I shouted, stop it. The police are on their way. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then he said softly, you called the cops on your own son? I called them on trespassers, I said. Another silence. Then footsteps, movement. From the window, I saw Mr. Green, my neighbor, step out of his porch. He walked toward them, cane in hand. Marcus, what's going on here? He called. Stay out of this, Mr. Green, Sierra snapped. Family matter. But Mr. Green didn't move. Family or not, you can break a door down. The law sits the law. The sound of sirens followed not long after, 2 patrol cars pulling up with flashing lights that painted the street red and blue. Sierra switched tactics instantly. I could hear the sob in her voice even through the door. Officers, thank God you are here. My mother-in-law Sit's gone crazy. She locked us out and all our things are inside. I opened the door then, slowly. 2 officers stood there. Behind them, Marcus held a crowbar, his face tight and unreadable. Sierra's eyes were glistening perfectly, not a smudge of mascara out of place. Mesetam, one officer said carefully, we just need to understand what's going on. This is my house, I said. Here sits the deed, the property tax statements, the utility bills, all in my name. The officer took the folder, scanned through it, then looked up. Mastam, these are valid documents. Do they pay rent? Marcus hesitated. She sits my mother. That sits not what I asked, the officer said. Sierra stepped forward. We've been living here for years. She can sit just... The officer raised a hand. If there sits no lease and no rent, she has every right to ask you to leave. You can take it to court, but you can force entry. Sierra Sit's face twisted. This is unbelievable. We still sue you, Evelyn. I met her eyes. You can try. The younger officer motioned toward their car. You still need to leave, Masam. The law is clear on this. Marcus looked at me, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Mom, where do you expect us to go? For a moment, I almost felt it, that old instinct to rescue him, to make everything better, but it was only a reflex, the ghost of motherhood that had been exploited too long. You still grown, Marcus. You still figure it out. Sierra Sit's mouth fell open. You still regret this. Maybe, I said quietly, but I still regret nothing more than keeping you here. The officers escorted them down the driveway. I watched them leave, Sierra cursing under her breath, Marcus silent beside her. When the last car door slammed and the street grew still again, I shut the front door, locked it, and leaned against it for a long moment. It was quiet, utterly, beautifully quiet. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and tea. I walked through each room slowly, the living room, the hallway, the kitchen, touching furniture like someone rediscovering an old photograph. When I reached the master bedroom, I hesitated at the door. I hadn't been in there for over a year. The air was stale, heavy with their perfume and cheap cologne. The bed was unmade, clothes strewn across the floor. I opened the windows wide, fresh air rushed in, sweeping away the scent of them. I changed the sheets, scrubbed the dresser, vacuumed the carpet until the machine hummed warm against my hand. I found my old comforter folded in the linen closet, still smelling faintly of lavender. When I finally lay down that night, the sheets were cool and clean beneath me. The pillow fit the shape of my head perfectly, as if it had been waiting. Outside, the city was quiet. Inside, for the first time in years, there was peace. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark. This house is mine again. And for once, saying it didn't feel like defiance. It felt like truth. Peace, I learned, has a strange way of inviting war. For the first week after Marcus and Sierra left, the house felt like a sanctuary. I opened every curtain, aired out every room, cooked breakfast for one. I even played my old records again, the ones Sierra said were too depressing. The silence wasn't sit empty anymore, it was healing. But peace, real peace, rarely goes unchallenged. It began with a phone call from my neighbor, Mr. Green. "Evelyn," he said softly, "you might want to see what SIP's going on online." "Online?" He hesitated. "Your daughter-in-law posted something about you." My stomach dropped. I didn't use social media much, barely enough to read the church announcements, but curiosity overpowered dread. I opened my laptop, searched her name, and there it was. A video, her face framed perfectly, tears glistening in her eyes. The caption read, "My elderly mother-in-law kicked us out. We have nowhere to go." The video played, and I felt my heart break all over again. She sat in a car, mascara-streaked, voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "We tried everything," she said, "but she sits unstable. She changed the locks, threw our things out, and told us we didn't sit belong. We took care of her for years, and this is how she repays us." Marcus sat beside her, head bowed, silent. His silence, that old familiar weapon, made her story sound true. The comments were merciless. "She sits heartless. Who kicks their own son out? Some old people go crazy with power." Thousands of them. Within days, her story had been shared across local pages. People offered donations, sympathy, pity, and hate. My phone began buzzing with messages from numbers I didn't know. "You stir a monster. Rot in hell." One even said, "You don't deserve family." I tried to ignore it, but it wore me down. Drop by drop, hour by hour. The same house that had just begun to feel safe again, filled with invisible noise. I didn't eat for 2 days. I unplugged the phone. I even thought about taking the video down somehow, though I didn't know how that worked. When Caleb Monroe called, I barely had the strength to answer. "I saw the video," he said quietly. "I said, I'm sorry you had to go through that." "What do I do now?" I asked. "Everyone believes her." "You do nothing," he said. "Not yet. People who build lies this big always leave cracks. When they do, we walk right through them." He was right. A week later, I received an email. It was from a woman named Layla Moore, someone I didn't know. "Mrs. Carter, I work with Sierra at Bright Glow Media. I have seen what she sips posting online. You don't deserve this. I have heard her brag in the office about how much money the videos are making her. If you ever need someone to confirm the truth, I am willing to help." I stared at the message for a long time, reading and rereading it. The words blurred with tears, not from sadness this time, but from something close to relief. I forwarded it to Caleb immediately. His reply came within minutes. "Perfect. This is our opening." We waited another week. During that time, Sierra posted 3 more videos, each one more dramatic than the last. In one, she sat by a motel window crying about the betrayal. In another, she showed a clip of the outside of my house, and said, "That's where we used to live," until she threw us out like garbage. Her followers multiplied. She was being invited on podcasts, online interviews, even a morning show. I became the villain of the month, a face people could project their outrage onto. But Caleb's words stayed in my mind. "They'll leave cracks." And they did. In one of Sierra's new videos, a viewer pointed out that the reflection in the window showed a luxury car behind her, not the clunker she claimed they were living in. Another noticed that her motel had the same curtains as a short-term rental downtown. The comments began to shift. People started asking questions she couldn't answer. That's when we released our video. It was Caleb's idea, but I insisted on recording it myself in my own living room, surrounded by the quiet peace they'd once tried to erase. No makeup, no tears, just me and the truth. I began simply, "My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 67 years old. For the past 2 years, I lived in my own home with my son and his wife. They told the world they took care of me. The truth is, I took care of them." Then I played the recordings, not all of them, just enough. Sierra's voice calling me useless, Marcus telling me to stay out of sight, the sound of their laughter as I scrubbed floors in the background. I showed the deed, the utility bills, and the eviction documents signed by law. I ended with this, "I don't hate them, but I will not be erased from my own story." Caleb uploaded it quietly. We didn't promote it. We didn't need to. By the next morning, it had over 1 million views. The comments section flooded again, but this time in my defense. I owe Evelyn an apology. She sits the victim. Proof speaks louder than tears. Sierra's empire began to crumble. Sponsorships vanished, brands withdrew, her followers turned. She deleted the videos one by one, then vanished from the internet entirely. Marcus called 2 days later. I didn't set pick up. The following week, Caleb met me at a small cafe near the courthouse. They start trying to settle, he said. They know if this goes to trial, the damages will be huge, but it sits your choice. I looked out the window. The city was waking up, people rushing, car horns blaring, life moving on as if none of this had ever happened. I don't want their money, I said. You are entitled to compensation. Then let them pay. But I won't spend a cent of it. He nodded. What will you do with it? I'll find a better use somewhere it still matter. A few days later, I opened a small brown envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $30,000. Settlement complete. I took it straight to the Haven Home for Women, a shelter that helps elderly women who've suffered abuse from their families. When I handed the check to the director, she asked, "Would you like to remain anonymous?" I shook my head. No, tell them it sits from someone who knows what it sits like to be invisible and who refuses to be again. That night, back in my living room, I watched the sunset stretch across the floorboards in stripes of gold. The same house, the same walls, but I wasn't the same woman. I wasn't waiting to be loved anymore. I had loved myself enough to fight back. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, the atmosphere. Everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and nerves. The walls were pale, the benches hard, and the people looked like ghosts waiting to be named. I sat in the front row, hands folded around a notebook I didn't need. My lawyer, Caleb, sat beside me, his pen clicking rhythmically, a steady sound that kept me anchored. Across the aisle, Marcus and Sierra sat together but not close. He looked smaller somehow, his suit a size too big. She was dressed to impress, sharp heels, sleek hair, eyes darting around like a cat in a cage. They didn't look at me, not once. The judge entered, gray-haired and heavy-voiced. This court is now in session. I had imagined this day 100 different ways. In none of them did I feel peace. But sitting there, I realized something. The pain had already done its work. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired and free. Caleb presented the case clearly: the defamation, the false claims, the emotional distress, the videos, the recordings, the harassment, every insult, every manipulation laid bare in the cold light of legal truth. When he played the recordings, the courtroom went silent. Sierra's voice filled the air again, arrogant, cruel, unmistakable. Evelyn, you lucky we let you stay here. Marcus, tell her she sets losing it. Hearing it echo in that room was surreal. For so long those words had been private weapons. Now they were evidence. When it was Sierra's turn to speak, she cried. Real tears this time, or maybe she just learned to make them look real. I was under stress, she said. I didn't mean the things I said. We just wanted stability. The judge leaned forward. And you thought stability came from humiliating the woman who provided for you. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. Marcus was worse. He couldn't meet my eyes. When asked to explain his silence, he said quietly, I didn't think it was that serious. I almost laughed. That serious. The phrase echoed in my head, the same words he used when his father left us. Back then he was only 8. I had comforted him, told him everything would be fine. I had believed it. Now I just stared at him and thought, you learned too well how to disappear when it mattered. When it was over, the judge ruled in my favor. The damages, $40,000 for defamation and emotional abuse. The verdict, clear and final. Sierra gasped. Marcus slumped forward. The judge's final words lingered in the air like scripture. Family ties do not excuse cruelty. Mrs. Carter, I hope you find peace. To the defendants, I hope you find remorse. The gavel struck once. Sharp, irrevocable. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, thinner, cleaner. Caleb shook my hand. You did it, he said. You stood your ground. I smiled faintly. I didn't win to hurt them. I just needed the truth to have a place to live. He nodded. So what will you do next? Something useful, I said. The next week, I went to Haven Home for Women again, the same shelter where I had donated the settlement check earlier. I asked to volunteer. The director, a kind woman named Julia, smiled. Are you sure the stories here can be heavy? I sup familiar with heavy, I said. My first day, I met a woman named Dorothy, 74, with bruises that hadn't fully faded and a voice soft as paper. Her daughter had taken her pension and left her stranded. When I told her my story, she reached for my hand. "You got out," she whispered. "Maybe I can too." And that was it. That was the moment I knew what I was meant to do. Week after week, I sat with women who had been silenced, used, forgotten. Some left with new apartments, new jobs, new hope. Others just needed someone to say, "You aren't sick, crazy, you still not alone." For every story I heard, I felt my own scars lighten a little. Healing, I learned, is a kind of echo. You give it and it returns. Months passed. My name drifted out of headlines. Sierra and Marcus disappeared from the public eye. Sometimes I wondered where they went, if they found a home, if they ever spoke about what they'd done. I didn't wish them harm, only distance. One afternoon, while sorting donations at the shelter, I found a framed sign that someone had left behind. It said, "Forgiveness isn't sit about letting people back in. It sits about walking away without dragging them behind you." I hung it in my kitchen that evening. It felt like something Henry would have said. The house felt alive again, quiet but content, like it had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. I still made tea every morning, still sat in my old armchair by the window, but now when I looked out, I didn't think about who used to walk up that driveway. I thought about who I had become walking down it. The money didn't change me, the verdict didn't either. What changed me was knowing I could survive myself, the fear, the silence, the loneliness, and come out still whole. One night I wrote in my journal, "Some people wait their whole lives for an apology. I built a life that didn't need one." And with that, I finally slept without dreams of doors or locks or voices calling my name. It's strange how time softens even the hardest edges. 5 years have passed since the trial, and sometimes I still catch myself listening for the echo of footsteps in the hallway, expecting a voice that no longer lives here. The house has changed again. The walls are a pale blue now, the furniture simpler. I sold the heavy oak dining table years ago and replaced it with a small round one by the window. It's enough for one, but I keep 3 chairs for company or maybe for hope. My life has become quiet but not lonely. I walk every morning. I tend the garden Henry planted, where the roses bloom stubbornly each spring. I read to children at the library on weekends and cook too much soup for one person. Sometimes when I'm sitting on the porch at sunset, the light hits the window just right, and I can see my reflection, older, yes, but softer somehow, like a woman who's forgiven the world even if the world never asked. It was a Saturday when Marcus showed up again. I was pruning the garden when I heard the sound of a car door closing. When I turned, there he was, standing by the gate, thinner than I remembered, a hesitant smile on his face. "Hi, Mom." For a long moment I couldn't move. The years between us hung heavy in the air. He looked older, tired. His eyes carried the kind of weariness that no sleep can fix. He stepped closer. "I didn't know if you want to see me." "I didn't," I said quietly. Then after a pause, "But you still here anyway." He nodded, his hand shaking. "Sierra left years ago. I lost the job, the house, everything. I messed up. I know that now." I studied his face. The son I had loved so fiercely, the man who had once been my greatest heartbreak. "Why are you here, Marcus?" He swallowed hard. "To say I sit and sorry for everything, for being too blind, too proud, too weak. I had a lot of time to think." The apology hung between us, fragile as glass. I could have shattered it with anger, I could have crushed him with memory, but instead I just nodded. "I believe you," I said, "but belief isn't the same as forgiveness." He looked down. "I know. I just needed you to hear it." We stood there for a long moment, two people with the same blood but entirely different lives. Then I said, "Would you like some tea?" He smiled faintly, surprised. "You still drink that same brand?" "Yes," I said, turning toward the house. "Some things don't change." We sat in the kitchen, my kitchen, in silence. I poured him tea the same way I used to when he was a boy. He stared at his cup as though afraid to touch it. "I don't expect you to let me back in," he said finally. "I just wanted to tell you I sit and proud of you. I watched your interviews, the work you done at the shelter. You help people, Mom." I didn't answer right away. Pride and sadness have a way of mixing into something wordless. When he left, he hugged me gently, not as a son claiming a mother, but as a man acknowledging one. 2 years later, I received a letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the envelope addressed neatly in blue ink. "Dear Mrs. Carter, my name is Maris. I'm 12. My mom, Sierra, told me about you. She said I should read your book. I did. I hope it's okay that I'm writing. I just wanted to say you sound really brave. I wish I could meet you sometime." I read it 3 times before I realized I was crying. I wrote back, "Dear Maris, thank you for your kind words. Brave is just another word for tired but trying anyway. I would love to meet you someday. Bring your curiosity and I'll bring the stories. He replied a week later with a drawing, a small house with a garden labeled Grandma's Place. I pinned it to the fridge. It's still there. Now, when people ask about revenge, about justice, I tell them this. Revenge is loud and short-lived. Justice is quiet and permanent. But peace, real peace, is something you build brick by brick, day by day, until it fits the shape of your soul. I didn't get my old life back. I got something better, a new one built entirely by my own hands. And every night before I turn off the lights, I walk through the house, checking the locks. Not because I'm afraid, but because the sound of a lock sliding into place reminds me of that morning years ago, the day I turned the key and the woman I used to be stepped out of her cage. I whisper the same words I did then. This house is mine. Only now I mean more than the bricks and walls. I mean this life.